a Meteor application on the web, and this is primarily catered towards the web and not directed towards any mobile applications. But yeah, so just to start, my name is Liew, and I worked traditionally in low latency applications in the capital markets area. Now, when I discovered Meteor, I became an enthusiast because I was really attracted to the elegant simplicity of how to develop web applications using such a simple method of development. So since then, since learning about it, I've created a whole number of apps, some ranging from small hobbyist applications all the way to larger enterprise applications that have to handle a high amount of throughput data. So, and like I mentioned before, these are a lot of my notes just on the things I had to overcome just so that you can have a working application at all levels. So one of the personal projects I'm working on right now is TorontoResidences.info. If you guys want, check it out. Definitely feel free to give me feedback. I'd love to hear from it. So, now the season premiere this Sunday, I felt it necessary for an obligatory reference to Game of Thrones. So winter is coming, or in this case, it already has come. So March 25th, we saw the end of free hosting on Meteor.com. And what that meant really was the end of one command free hosting, or one command deployment and free hosting on Meteor.com. So like imagine this is a scenario. You have a great idea, and you decide on Meteor. It's going to be the framework that you use to implement your idea. And from everywhere you've been reading, it only takes a couple hours or a weekend to develop an application. And you're going to disrupt the entire industry with your new application. Every hacker's dream. So, well, how do you showcase it? What are you going to do? So, I guess that the fundamental question that you sort of have to ask is, well, what is a Meteor app? And I guess people not familiar with it, it's a framework that's built upon open source technology stack. The apps are clearly written in JavaScript and a templating language for the front end. And I guess in extremely simplified terms, Meteor app is essentially a Node.js app that uses MongoDB as its backend store. So knowing that it's a Node.js app, a whole range of options sort of come about that range from high touch, where essentially you have to manage a server yourself and be a sysadmin, all the way down to platform as a service, where essentially you just need to deploy your code, and that's about it. So some of the solutions I'm just going to go over, I've outlined in the table, and they range from cloud servers to using Heroku, which is a platform as a service, and to the new service that Meteor team just released, Meteor Galaxy. So if you'll notice, with the total amount of system administration you need, typically the cost is inverse. So the higher amount of system administration, usually the cost is a little bit lower, just because system admin work is not easy. In fact, I would say it's one of the more difficult things that a lot of people just sort of leave as an afterthought, and then when they get there, when they get to actually deploying that, they realize that there's so many nuances and inconsistencies that they have to deal with. So, we're all here to learn about deploying Meteor apps. So one of the solutions we're going to talk about is the cloud server. And when I say cloud server, this is literally like renting a box or a virtual private server from one of the providers. The big providers out there are Amazon Web Services, Google, Linode, and DigitalOcean. So once you provision a machine from one of these vendors, there's a couple of steps you have to take, and I'm just going to break them down. The first one is setting up a reverse proxy. Here I use nginx, and you can use Apache, but for the most part, a lot of people just use nginx. Then the second is you have to set up your database, your Mongo database, and because it's a Node.js application, you actually have to set up Node as well. And then from there, what we do is we have to decompose your Meteor application to its individual constituent parts, or break it down into a Node.js application. And from there, you just start it. So, step one, just going to go over it. You have to set up nginx. And I'm just going to come up right now. I actually really hate the way they spell nginx. It actually took me a couple of months to realize it's pronounced nginx. For a long time, I was calling it nginx and nginx, and but anyway, that's just a small little rant. But what is it? It's actually just an HTTP server that's highly efficient, has a small memory footprint, and from the viewpoint of Meteor and what we're using it for, we're actually using it as a reverse proxy. So it allows us to set up easily virtual hosts where you can host multiple applications, and as well, when you start scaling your application, it's really important because it allows you to load balance between all these individual servers. So setting that is quite simple, and again, I'm just highly simplifying here and assuming that we have a Debian box. You typically install nginx, and within it, there are a couple of config folders that you need to be aware of. So, as an example, just using a URL. So you create a config file, and what you're doing is, and I know it's hard to see, and code is never something that really presents too well, but essentially what you're doing is you're having nginx listed on port 80, and that it's going to forward the traffic to whatever instance of Meteor you're running. So this is important, especially when you start dealing with applications that have high data throughput, because what you're going to want to do is start setting up multiple Meteor instances, and nginx is going to end up directing the traffic to and load balancing all of that data coming through. So once you have your configuration set up, and here's an example one, that'll actually work. It's really basic, but obviously it gets much more complicated, and you have to read all the documentation and add all the bells and whistles that you want. But once you have a working config file, you make a symbolic link and you put it into the site's name of the file. And from there, what you do is you reload nginx, and what that does is it takes up that configuration file. Now let's say, just for, I guess for personal purposes, not for large-scale enterprise, let's say if you want to deploy a MongoDB server, you literally just need to install it. And the default install starts it, and it doesn't actually make it externally accessible, so you're secure on that point. You don't need to worry about too much configuration. And like I said, this is, I'm not going too much in detail, and the devil's in all the details in terms of how well things scale out. Once your application starts getting much more of a load, usually, typically, you'll want to set up replica sets. You're going to want to set up multiple MongoDB servers. You might not even want to host on the same box. But for demonstration purposes, this is really all you need to do. So next, you have to set up Node.js. And now this is a big caveat. Meteor actually uses a very old version of Node.js, and it actually does not work on the latest. Now, whether that's an issue or not, I think they're on the Meteor roadmap, they're looking to resolve this. But if you're going to install it on a virtual instance, one of the nuances is that you have to pick up an older version. And I learned this the hard way, because typically whenever I'm deploying an application, you just always want to take the latest version, because newer is the bigger, better deal, right? So here, I had to learn the hard way that you had to find the old version, download it, and then that's the one thing that you have to deploy. So those commands are essentially just doing that. It's installing Node.js. Now, from there, it's actually quite simple how to break down a Meteor app into its node constituents. Really, they have this command called Meteor build, and that actually creates a zipped archive file for you. So once you generate that zipped archive, you unzip it, and it's going to have all the node components. And from there, you go into the server, and you make sure you install all the add-ons that you initially used. And what you do is you start your node application. So here are some of the settings I have are, it's on port 3000, because before in our nginx config, what we did was we pointed it to go to our Meteor instance at port 3000. So, and then I also specify the MongoDB, which is on the local instance. So let's say if you decide to use a hosting service for MongoDB, like Compose or MongoLab, you would specify the URL here. So now, I know it doesn't seem like much, but like I said, the devil's in the details, and it starts to get, there's a lot of things that you have to take care of and manage that there are a lot of tools available that you can do to improve the process. So there is a node package called MUP, or MEP, or Meteor up, sorry, so that you can actually facilitate a lot of the process I'm talking about. Or another thing you can do if you really want, if you have high amounts of knowledge, you can actually use Docker to sort of automate the process of setting up all of your systems, or how you want to distribute your servers and your MongoDB, and it really can help facilitate that. But again, it requires a lot of knowledge on the Docker end. And another thing, or application that I discovered, which I think is quite cool, is Docker. And that is an application which tries to act like Heroku, but uses Docker technology to sort of automate the process, so without anybody even knowing that you're using Docker in the background. So, well, what are the pros and cons? So the pros are, it's affordable, and affordable is always relative. Obviously, costs can definitely scale out the more the larger application gets. But you have ultimate configuration of the system. It's very hacker friendly. There's a lot of documentation out there, and everything, all the information you want is there. You just have to look it up, know about it, and implement it. So in that sense, it's very manually scalable. But right out of the box, the cons are there is auto-scaling. Now, AWS provides flexibility in terms of being able to auto-scale your servers, but for the most part, a lot of people don't take advantage of this. There are no nice services like automated backups, use of log, the example that I showed. There's no system monitoring, and there's a lot of system administration here. Now, a lot of this can be handled yourself. You can implement it, but again, it comes back to the whole time, money, triangle requirements, just in terms of making sure you can get all this done. So, one thing, the next service I want to talk about is Heroku. Now, Heroku is a platform as a service. It's one of the bigger providers out there. I think it got purchased by Salesforce, I'm not sure, but and their whole goal is for you to focus on code versus system administration. Some people think it's all combined and you need to have a good fundamental understanding of both, but from Heroku's point of view, they're trying to have you focus just on coding, no matter how inefficient you are, and they'll deal with all the system administration, security, patches, updates, and all the nice things that you'd ever want. So, and again, just to show you how simple it is, you can literally get an application up in 5 commands. Normally, you just install the Heroku toolchain, and then you create an instance. And then from there, for Meteor, what's different is that you need what they call build packs. Build packs are just scripts that define all the server processes and what needs to be installed and set up so that your application works correctly. So they also have a MongoDB add-on. And so, because they don't actually provide the database itself, what they're doing is they're just giving you what they call a dyno, which is sort of a pseudo-virtualized instance that just handles your code and doesn't have a file system that you can store on. So it's literally just a virtual instance. And what you do is you add on MongoDB so that they'll create a free database, which is, the free tier is 500 megabytes and doesn't have awful tailing. And I kind of mentioned that because it's actually really important. If you don't have awful tailing with Meteor, what it means is Meteor will actually start polling the database. So this comes back to the whole interrupt versus polling architecture design, where just running constantly and manually checking for changes adds a lot of performance impact. Now, if you have a smaller application, really, it's I guess it's not a concern. But just to give an example, I remember one time, when you first learn Meteor, the whole thing is you just want to develop something really cool, you do it, you think it's awesome, you have all this reactivity in it, you don't do any performance analysis, and then you think, oh yeah, it's good. You showcase it, and then you deploy it to the real world. And then you start sweating because you realize, for the most part, you can't handle the load of all the people, all the data, and the real world activity. And I had to learn the hard way that a lot of it had to do with the way I was grabbing data, and not just the front-end code, but the oplog tailing made a huge impact in terms of how much data could get pushed out, and also the user experience. So I'm not saying Node.js or Meteor is inefficient. Obviously, code is sort of up to the developer in terms of how optimized it wants to be, but definitely low-hanging fruit and easy performance impact is just to use MongoDB and oplog tailing and replica sets and whatnot. So, and once you have that all set up, you literally just set your URL and then you do git push Heroku master. So I'm not going to assume everyone's familiar with Git, but they're using the Git toolchain to sort of push a branch of code to the server and deploy the application. So pros and cons, super simple app deployment, and ease of scaling. So literally, if you want to scale up your servers, it comes down to literally clicking a button up and down of how many dynos you want. They have commercial support, and they also have a free tier. So it's pretty, I guess, hacker-friendly in that sense. If you have a hobby project you want to just put up there, the free tier really enables you to do that. Now, the cons are definitely the cost. So once you actually want to start scaling up and doing useful things, the costs definitely seem to balloon up, and it's definitely like the airplane model. I find I might be exaggerating a bit, but whenever you want to do anything useful or like have your own domain, you get charged for it. So you get sort of charged for everything. If you want backup for database, if you want to have a larger Mongo database, all these sort of things that come into play, there's always a charge with it. And not that it's egregious. And like I said, there's always a value in the services, but for the most part, it's nobody likes getting dinged all the time for any time they need to sort of scale up. And one of the cons is typically the scaling is not automated. You actually have to be there. So if you're under a high load, it's not going to help if you're not by a computer and you can't actually start increasing your server capacity. So I guess the next thing is Meteor Galaxy, which they're the new kid on the block. They're the new kid who kicked the old kid that was free to the curb, and it's developed by the Meteor team. So what they've done here is that they've actually integrated with the Meteor framework so that you can actually deploy your application as simply as you did before. So before, you used to just do Meteor deploy at domain.meteor.com. So the only caveat here is with Meteor Galaxy, you actually have to provision your database separately. So they don't even offer the option of giving it to you. You actually have to come up with your way a service that gives you an externally accessible database. So just to show you how simple it is, the only difference between before is that you now have to actually put a couple of keys in your settings.json file, which if you don't already have one, you just need to add in a couple of keys. And in it, you specify your root URL, which is your domain, and then your Mongo URL as well. So to show you how simple that is, really you set the environment variable, the deploy host name, which is galaxy.meteor.com, and you just do the good old Meteor deploy the application, and then specify your settings. So now with that, you end up getting some really cool services. So you actually get performance monitoring. You can actually see how many clients are connected, what CPU usage you're using, what memory usage, and combine that with other services like the Kadira.io. It means that you can have really fine-grained control from your application all the way down to the server implementation of what type of, what kind of impact your code is having or what users are experiencing. So in terms of pros and cons, super simple, the ease of scaling and performance monitoring, like talked about in commercial support. Now, the cons is definitely, and this is not a bad thing because there's always a value to their service, and especially consider that you're dealing with the actual Meteor company. You know that they have expertise in the subject. So they did eliminate the free tier. So before where you can just sort of upload an app to the website and showcase your new cool toy, they don't really offer that anymore. And as well, the self-managed MongoDB, it means that you actually have to provision one yourself. Now, how you choose to do it, the two big providers are MongoLab and Compose.io, and the pricing for that is quite high. I think they understand the market and I guess the enterprise level and what people are willing to pay for it. So it sort of puts out of reach of, let's say, a startup level, but in terms of performance, it's fantastic. It's probably one of the best options you can use in terms of scaling it out. Now, obviously,
you said price out of reach. You mean Meteor's Galaxy's price or Mongo Lab's price?
Well, no, I'm saying just from a hobby level, but just from a regular application level, it's amazing. So one of the big applications or private applications I was talking about, we use Compose.io, which their performance, it's probably, well, I'm not going to say better than what that bank had internally, but we just had the expertise. But as well, it was price point. We thought price point was really fair, and as well, the service that we're getting was amazing. So I'm just saying, just from an individual level. So cost relative to other services.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you're talking about database costs versus the Galaxy.
What are you talking about to host a small app? How much money are?
So if you go in Meteor Galaxy, let's say if you use the base cost, I would say it's probably call it, and again, this is estimation, around $30 a month for the developer tier, which doesn't include commercial support. And then let's say for Mongo, you're probably talking about per gig, I think it's around like $20 or $30, and these are US dollars. So altogether, let's say $100 a month, which is not even, when you're talking about a startup and applications, that's, that's literally peanuts in terms of actual cost.
Right.
But let's say one thing I like about the Meteor community was that it was all based upon, I guess, sort of that hacker mentality. People were building all these tools, and it's all about just doing cool things with it and sort of making this level where you start having to pay for everything. It's sort of, I know, like, I understand the difference between the business and personal, but it's just one of the things that, like, it's sad to see. Like, it was really interesting to see the community sort of pop up around, like these free services that were happening. But nothing in this world is free.
There's the free tier on Heroku would
Sure. And the caveat is that it doesn't spin. The free tier is kind of limited in the sense that you only have 500 megabytes of data on the Mongo lab, and in terms of you only get one dyno, which means, and it also rests when it's not being used. So let's say if a user wants to come in, it'll spin it up, which is not a big deal for most people. So yeah, exactly, and it's definitely a viable option for that.
So what was the, sorry, on the Heroku thing, this is detailed, I know, but you said something about you couldn't have your own domain name? You can't CNAME anywhere?
Well, no, they charge you for that.
CNAME anywhere?
Sorry, to CNAME?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But it's all, I think, for any sort of added services.
Obviously important. URL is first
Right.
brand.
But we're talking about, like I said, if you're a startup and one of the things, I don't think it's
I think it's just SSL that they charge for.
really. Okay.
You can have a CD.
It's pretty hard to charge for CD.
Yeah, it's here, but
Is that happening somewhere else?
so
But
what about,
SSL is like $20 a month.
which
Which you probably need.
yeah.
What about image magic in terms of doing some image processing on the server? Is there any, those all sort of, obviously on the cloud, that's no problem with
Are you sorry when you talk about image magic and the application, like, are you?
if you want to do some image resizing, image processing.
I don't think the application. Are you asking if the application would be available to you?
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part, I think most of the GNU tools are going to be available. But there is no. It's like the AWS thermal file system where I don't think you'd have to use an external like S3 to sort of store all your files. And that sort of concludes, I guess, some of the options I talked about. So in conclusion, it's Meteor is a great framework, and that's why we're all here in this room. It simplifies web development, and because of that, there's lots of options for you, and it all depends on your skill level. And keep going, guys. Now, as well, I also have, if there is more time, I mentioned the application docker, and I kind of just discovered it just because I was starting to experiment and started playing with Docker configurations to sort of manage everything. And I stumbled upon this application, Docker, and it's very obvious, so I'm just kind of going over it just because it was really interesting. What they did was they implemented Heroku equivalent using Docker, hence the horrible name Docker.
Is it a Star Wars reference?
Oh, yeah, yeah, it could be, but I don't see any.
No, it's Duke $20. Wasn't it an evil thing?
Sorry?
It was evil, so you wouldn't really want to go.
Hey, evil is very cool these days. So, and so like I mentioned, you can run your applications in Docker containers without even really knowing that you're using Docker. Good or bad thing, who knows, but it's one of those, it's really cool to see people do this. So it's the same method of deployment as Heroku, where you use Git to push it, and it supports all Heroku build packs. So you can actually sort of piggyback on that community. And so it's really good for what we were talking about, that people who are, I guess, more cost sensitive and they just want to sort of create cool things and showcase it. So I just sort of took some screenshots when I'm playing with it. What you do is typically once DigitalOcean has a pre-made app with Doku. So since Docker uses a lot of virtualization technology, there's some nuances, I guess, with setting up the OS, and what they've done is they've prepared one for you. Once you set it up, you're just going to point to it, and you set it up. So you can actually have your subdomains So let's say you have xxx.com, and then you can actually set up subdomains so that you can create new apps and deploy it to that subdomain. So, and to show you how simple it is, what you do is you just create an app from the command line using their toolchain. And like before, you set the root URL on the MongoDB, and they actually have a plugin for MongoDB as well. So you could actually start using this to set up all your multiple Mongo instances and talk about all the features that to help improve performance. And once you do that, you just literally link it up, and then you just push it. And I've been playing with it. It's definitely really cool, but like I mentioned, it's definitely not a production level application. You know, it fails a couple of times here and there, but I would say 90% of the time it works. So it's definitely one of those cool new technologies that hopefully maybe they'll build it up and there'll be community around it, and then people can talk about, or people can start making money off it, I guess. So. Pros and cons. You know, you get the extensibility of that cloud managed solution. So let's say if you do provision a virtualized instance, you can now put this service layer like Heroku, so that you can still have that server and you can still do all these separate things, but you can still have that easy low sysadmin, low cost, and as well as easy deployment. But one of the things I mentioned, it's a little bit difficult to scale. I was trying to implement it on multiple servers and have them all talk to each other. There's, again, some issues, but it's definitely an interesting technology. But there's no performance monitoring like on Galaxy. But you know, this is sort of the old adage where you get what you pay for. And that's it.
Thanks. Do you guys have questions? I'm curious to hear more about Galaxy.
So we actually moved one of our big apps over to it just because, from a cost perspective, it made sense in terms of what we were actually paying and what we were using. So the performance monitoring tools, they definitely helped us isolate some errors here there, but it's not. One thing I would like to see sort of an API where you can sort of extract that information to sort of do it separately, but for the most part, it's definitely, it's more like on a, you have to go to the website to sort of access services. But like I said, it'd be interesting if you could start getting APIs, start measuring your performance, and start creating a server farm and seeing whenever there are issues here, and then start deploying new instances and being really smart about it. But it's not there. I'm sure it will grow, and they're definitely targeting the enterprise market, so I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing a lot more cool things.
Sorry. One of the good things on Galaxy right now is you can actually see the entire console running off the server.
Yeah.
Can you do that with any of the other solutions that are there easily?
Easily?
So you don't know okay, so
Not that I
that's
know.
a huge benefit.
Exactly, not that I know. Yeah.
You can.
Because you can monitor the health of your application what's going on.
Mm-hmm. But
It's debugging on the servers.
no, well, it's not something you want to be doing anyways, right? So,
Yeah, a good idea is to use a service like log entries, paper trail. There's a service
What's
called-
Paper Trail?
So if you're using a platform that doesn't give you good log management built in, so like for example on Heroku, you can tail the logs, but it's just sort of a raw tail in a command line, and it's not historical. But you can use a service like log entries or paper trail, and they are basically hosted log management. So they'll give you your logs will stream to the service and be stored and then searchable, and they can also give you alerts on patterns in the logs and things like that.
For a while, we used a format service where because we had really restricted proxies. What we would do is we would put all the log files and then put it to AWS, and from there have a service that would parse it. And I know it's, but it was a matter of just sort of using what tools were available to us.
With DigitalOcean, what's the reason you install nginx?
So that's just more of a performance and scalability thing. So, so one way, easy way to sort of scale up Meteor X is just to have multiple instances. You can be on the same machine, or if you want, same machine or on different servers. And then what you use, that reverse proxy is to route your traffic. So it helps load balance the issue. And it's actually much better at serving up assets than Node.js is. So it allows you to handle much more traffic and let nginx do what it's good at, and then let Node.js or Meteor do what it's good at, which is sort of doing the implementation.